Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. For translucent subjects like flowers, backlighting can really bring out the colour. You do need to take care with the setup, but the results can be very rewarding. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Now I've chosen these lilies as the subject, and I've used these because they are particularly translucent, and that's going to be important because with backlighting all the light that your camera is going to eventually see is going to come through the subject. Okay, so the next thing to do would be to set up not just a camera position at the front here, but also a light at the back. Okay, so for the light at the back, what I've got here is a 500 joule battery powered studio flash head, and that is going to form the main backlight for this subject. And then at the front here I've placed this tripod. Now this is going to be aligned precisely, once I've got the camera on it, with the backlight at the back and the flowers at the front. Now the idea is going to be that if all these are lined up properly, the camera position, the subject and the light at the back here, the subject itself should hide the light from the view of the camera. So let's just stick a camera on the tripod and see if it all works. Now I'm using this medium format camera which is tethered into Capture One software. That way it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. On the front of the camera here I have an 80mm lens. Now that's a standard lens, so the full format equivalent would be something like a 50mm lens. You'll get the same field of view that way. Okay, so let's just pop this on here and I'll turn the camera on. There we are. And the software has recognised the camera, and you can see on here the initial settings that I have on the camera at the moment. So it's in full manual mode. I've got a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second, ISO 100, and at the moment the aperture's set to 2.8, which is wide open for this particular lens. Okay, so to set all this up, what I'm actually going to do is make use of live view. So if I just start up live view here, there we are. Now you can see this is a live picture from the camera, and you can see in the background here, this is the light. So just to make that a little more obvious, what I'll do is I'll just turn the modeling light on. There we are. And now you can see the light quite easily on the screen here. So using that as a guide, what I can do is now maneuver this light until I can't see it anymore. So if I just move it round here, for instance, something like that, there's actually an advantage to moving this further away, and that is it will appear smaller in the frame, and therefore it's easier to hide. There we are, something like that. So with that, I can just turn off the modeling light. Yeah, that looks okay, I think. So while I'm here, I'll also have a look at the focus on the camera. So I'll zoom all the way in, and you can see it's slightly out of focus, so I can use the focus controls here just to move the lens. There we are, so it's bringing it into focus like that. Yes, that looks okay. So now I can dispense with live view. And the next thing I want to do is pick an aperture that's going to give me a reasonable depth of field at this distance with this sort of focal length lens. Now 2.8 isn't going to do that, it's going to be far too narrow. So what I want to do is change this to something more reasonable. So I'm going to change it to f8. And to test that I don't get any contamination from the house lights at those settings, what I'm going to do is just temporarily turn off the flash at the back here, and we'll just grab an image. Now hopefully this will give a dark image. There we go, something like that, which means that any light which is actually being recorded from now on will only come from the flash. So we'll just turn the flash back on again, and just at an arbitrary energy level We'll grab an image and see what we get. Okay, so we can see from this that we're starting to get something. We're getting a nice rim light effect, but there's just not enough of it. So I need to increase the energy, I think. But besides that, I also need to increase the efficiency. As I have this set at the moment, there is no reflector on this flash. So I'm just going to add this zoom reflector. I'm just going to pop that on the front here, something like that. There we are. Now that's going to concentrate the beam a little and make it a bit more efficient. Okay, so the next thing to do would be just to increase the energy in the flash. Now I can do that through the flash sync trigger, which on this camera is built in. So I'll just bring up the flash sync trigger, that flash is selected, and I'll just add one stop of energy. There we go. So with that, I can capture another image. Yes, and those two changes seem to have done the trick. That's brought out all these petals quite nicely. But one of the disadvantages, if you like, of using this method is that it's very directional. If there's anything in the way, like a leaf or something else, then you're going to get a shadow, which is what is happening here. You can see that there's some shadows on the back of the main subject there. So in order to soften those down a little, what I'm going to actually do is add another light. So here I have yet another 500 joule battery powered light, and what I'm going to do, just place this about here somewhere, and I'm going to point it at the subject from here, something like that. Just turn it on. There we go. Now the idea of this will be that it will fill in some of those shadows caused by this light. We'll grab an image and see what happens. There we are, and that's filled in the shadows quite effectively. You can see in this image it's quite a lot more lit than the previous one, like this. So we're beginning to get there, I think. Okay, but I think overall the background here is a little bland for me. I'd like to add a bit more interest. So to add a bit of interest, what I'm going to do is just place this piece of greenery, which I've just placed in a lab stand, just off to one side a bit. I'll just adjust that like that. I'll place another one at the other side. So with those in place, let's grab an image and see if it's improved it. Well, it's certainly made it different. Yes, I think some form of adjustment is required there. It's not really doing what I wanted. I think this one is a bit too much, so I'll just take that out of the way altogether. And I think this one needs to be adjusted way back here, probably as far back as I can get it, something like that. So we'll try that and see what that looks like. Yes, I think that's a bit better. I think less is more. I like the way that this is now being lit in green as a complementary colour to the rest of it here. Okay, so we're definitely getting there. I think I'd like to just light up this area in the centre here just a little bit. And to do that, I'm just going to use a small concave mirror. And what I'm going to do is recycle some of this light back onto the flower again. So I need to place the mirror somewhere in here, probably like that. There we are. So I've placed it in this lab stand, and in order to get it in something like the right position, what I'm going to do is turn the modelling light on this flash head. So now as I adjust the position of the mirror, you can see the reflection is illuminating the centre of the flower. So if we go for something like that, there we are. I'll turn the modelling light out and we'll grab another image. There we are, that's made a little bit of a difference. I'll show you what we had before. That's what we had before, and that's what I've got now. So it's illuminated this area in here, which is what I wanted. Okay, so I think for actually capturing the subject, that's it. What What I'm going to do now is go into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the file of the image that I captured earlier. So the first thing I want to do is just make a copy of this so I can edit the copy and leave the camera original alone. Now the way I prefer to do that is just to go onto the background layer here, right click the mouse, ask for a duplicate layer, but ask for a new document. And we'll just call it Lily. There we are, so I've got a new document here. I can close down the camera original. I've always got that to go back to. This is what I will now be editing. Okay, so there's a few things I'd like to do to this. The first thing would be just to maybe tidy up the background a bit. So what I want to do is actually separate these bits out. Now there's lots of ways to achieve that sort of result. What I'm going to do is use an adjustment layer. So click on Adjustments, and I'm going to go for a Levels adjustment. And now I'm going to actually take down the whole image. So I'm just going to make the whole lot quite a lot darker. Maybe just control the contrast in those areas a little. Something like that. Now with all adjustment layers, you actually end up with a mask as well. So wherever I paint on this mask in black will reveal the image underneath without that adjustment on. So we'll just make sure that black is selected as the foreground color. Click on a paintbrush. I've got a very big soft paintbrush here. So just to illustrate what I'm going to do, I'll just bring the flower back in the middle here. There we are. Maybe some of the greenery. There, that's the sort of thing. But I've also brought back some of the background, which is possibly a little bright. So what I want to do is now adjust that mask in just this area. So in order to do that, what I can do is change the foreground color back to white, and now change my paintbrush for something a little smaller and harder. There we are. I'm making some very small changes there. So in order to help me, I'm going to actually just zoom into that area, and you can see the difference that I'm making. So I'll just follow the edge and just paint that back a bit. There we are, and just work our way around the image, just taking that mask and extending it around the subject. There we are. So if I just turn that adjustment off, this is what we had, and this is what I've got now. Okay, so the next stage I think would be to select a crop. Now I'm going to use this for video, so I'm going to use a specific ratio, and I'll use the drop down here to select 16:9. So what I want to do with this is tighten it up quite a lot, I think, and I also want to rotate it, I think. So I'll just change it in the frame slightly. There we are. I think that works quite well. I'll just click on OK. Now we still have a few things to sort out here. I've got the edge of the vase in here, I've got a bit missing from the corner, and I've got one of the clamps showing. So what I want to do is just add another layer to this, and on this layer I'm simply going to paint in black. So I'll find a paintbrush. This time I'm going to make it quite large and very soft, and I'll just start by painting in the corner. I'm going to actually paint out quite a lot of that flower there, and the clamp, and the bottom here where the vase is. So there we have it. The backlighting technique lends itself admirably to translucent subjects such as flowers, and this has worked reasonably well for this one, I think. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image. And if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.